Hey Scott, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today for one of these JumpCloud Partner Success interviews. This is where I chat with successful JumpCloud partners from all across the world, but I'm pleased to say that you're much closer to home to me. You're in the UK, as am I, so it's a bit of a treat to speak to someone from the United Kingdom or based in the United Kingdom. So kick things off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Great to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me. Always lovely to chat to you. My name is Scott Nursten. I'm the CEO and founder here at ITHQ. We're based in West Sussex, in Crawley in West Sussex in the UK, as you called out. But we have teams all across the country. We've got remote workers. A lot of people are actually based up north near Manchester. So that's a bit of a hub too. And we're looking to expand geographically both into Europe and into North America. ITHQ was founded in 2020, what I like to call the fateful pandemic year of 2020. The story behind it was we realized there were a lot of resellers in the UK, a lot of people who are shifting products and subscriptions without necessarily solving the problem. So selling stuff, not really delivering outcomes. So the point of ITHQ, the story behind it was to solve wicked tech problems. Actually, if I move my camera, there you go. Solving wicked tech problems. That's our strap line. Yeah, we exist to sort of go and tackle those gnarly problems that people haven't been able to solve yet. That's often in the cyberspace, but also in cloud, in infrastructure, and IT operations. So our typical client does not look like anything. It's not a typical client at all. There is no typical, I suppose, at ITHQ because of that mantra there, solving wicked tech problems. We have everything from international airports, large banks, small boutique fund managers. Our typical client, if you wanted to find the commonality between them, really understands the value of their data and protecting that data, making sure that their data platforms are resilient, not just from cyber attacks, but from human error, from unforeseen circumstances, basically.
Cool. Well, I've just written down value of data there. I think that's a really cool point, and maybe we'll touch upon that when we talk about some of the uses for JumpCloud as we go along. But yeah, I'm loving
Sure.
the solving wicked tech problems that we discussed before. I think it's a great sort of tagline and mantra to run the organization by. But what was it like, sort of trying to start a business in 2020? Then was I'm guessing that was challenging.
Well, it just basically tore up the plan and put it in the bin because we
Mm.
I'm a big believer in planning and writing strategies, etc. In fact, one of our differentiators as a business is we talk about a strategic approach to solving those problems. You know, looking long term. People always want a quick fix. That's not always the right answer. So, because I'm fully bought into the concept of planning, even though I recognize that when you make a plan, it's probably not going to look anything like reality. At least you have something to work to. Even with all of that in mind, 2020 was still somewhat of a shock. We thought we were going to start, we'd put some projections of first year numbers of clients to win, etc. We'd went and got some fancy new offices in Manor Royal near Gatwick Airport here. And 3 months later, got sent home. And because of that, really a lot of providers were not considering jumping ship or taking, a lot of customers were not considering jumping ship or taking on a new provider because they were experiencing so much change and pain already with lockdowns and remote working and everything they had to go through. So it actually, and this is testament to our team, actually turned out to be a complete godsend because we focused inwards. We focused on our ISO certifications, our processes, our documentation, our procedures. And as a result of all of that, we exited the pandemic with ISO 9001, ISO 27001, Cyber Essentials Plus, being registered Crown commercial suppliers to the Scottish government. So we pivoted fast, I suppose, and we made the best of a bad situation. But the year went nothing like uh, the original plan.
No, well, I guess that's the same for a lot of people. And I like what you mentioned about, even though you're a little probably different to me in the respect that I kind of struggle with to make sort of long-term plans. But I guess that what you're saying is you can, if you're fully bought into the planning mindset, you accept that it's not always going to go to plan. I guess if you pardon the expression, and then you can sort of change and do things differently.
What I always say is once you write a plan, what you've got is a perfect document of how things aren't going to turn out, because that's just how it works. That's the point of planning. But you've got something to work towards. And in that plan, we had things like our mantra, being problem solvers, being solution oriented. So that's, we're here 5.5 years later, and that's not only what we do, but it's our tagline. You see it everywhere in our business, is that solving problems. My team are very outcomes focused, solution oriented, and that's all come out of that plan. So while the numbers don't look the same, the headcount doesn't look the same, the clients don't necessarily look the same as what we sat down and planned. A lot of what was in that plan still holds true today, and sort of forms a core belief system in the business. So it's become part of the culture and the values and everything. So yeah, there's definite benefit in that whole planning piece. It just doesn't necessarily pan out the way you expect always.
Yeah, well, it's clearly working, or from the outside at least. I mean, I was amazed when you mentioned 5.5 years. I thought you'd been around longer than that because of the sort of maturity of the organization and the size and the growth. So you've done an awful lot in that 5.5 years, of which some of that was prime pandemic. So it's a pretty impressive start.
Yeah, thank you. And we've won awards for that, etc. And the growth is testament to what people do. But we definitely say in the organization that you focus on the outcomes and the deliverables, the prize, literally the result of that will be growth and money, if you like. If you focus on the money, if you focus on things like revenue, I find it ends up becoming a perverse incentive because you start to do anything to chase that number. Whereas if we focus on quality outcomes, solving for the customer, solving problems, the result is revenue growth, etc.
Yeah, and one thing that you did mention, and again, I mentioned I wrote it down, was the value of data, understanding customers that get that. Because and you just mentioned the money there and chasing revenue. I think one of the things that some MSPs or a lot of MSPs historically have been guilty of is just accepting clients of, it's a client comes along, we'll take them on board. Even though
Mm.
that client probably isn't aligned with the thinking of the ethos of the MSP in terms of, in your case, having understanding the value of data. I've always worked on even when way back in my MSP, that if you come across a client that doesn't value their data, then there's probably not a great deal of work that you can do with them, and it's probably never going to be a fruitful long-term relationship because they're never going to invest in protecting that data or enhancing or securing that data. So how do you have those conversations with prospects initially to check that they're a good fit for you?
Well, we don't always have that conversation. We ask a lot of questions, and we have sort of agendas that we follow from the intro call onwards to help flush that out. Ultimately, we want to see that people are willing to invest. There's always different quantums of investment, and that's possibly down to even how your business is performing, right? You can't spend money that you don't have today. But it's more the way people talk. If they do that, well, I can get it over there for 5 quid, and you're saying it's 1,000. So why am I paying you 200x? And you go, these aren't even the same thing that we're talking about. They go, yeah, but look, 5 quid. So if they're very price focused, not value focused, not what am I getting for that money, that's an immediate indicator. Um, Normally, it comes from them. Actually, interestingly, normally the driver is. Like I said, we work with a boutique fund management firm who's one of our biggest customers. They nearly spend the same as someone like a Gatwick Airport or a Hippodrome casino, and that's because they have a proprietary algorithm and approach to investment selection. That is they recognize that's their secret sauce. That's their Colonel's secret recipe, so to speak. Um, they don't want that falling into the wrong hands. So even the way they control that internally, right? It is like the Coca-Cola recipe, from what I've heard, how that stays locked in a safe, and three fingerprints are required to get near it, and that sort of thing. That's how they treat their data, their selections, their investments, and their investment process. So the fact that they're a much smaller business, a sort of 60 headcount, that's something that would often exclude them from other MSPs immediately, or would be a razor for selection. And yet, in the discussion with their head of IT, in the discussions with their head of IT that I had early on and that my team have had subsequently, it's very clear the value they place on their data. So there's not an easy way to flush that out. It is more of a feel, and it happens through discussions, but there's always indicators along the way.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting the way you do that, and I think that it's you say it's difficult, but it is probably a feeling, which is obviously you over time and experience you pick up on what's going to be a good partner to work with and what isn't. Speaking of partnerships, then I guess we need to talk a little bit about JumpCloud. I mean, a few questions. How did you initially hear about us, and what first attracted you to JumpCloud? We're always interested to know that because we can feed that to the team and try and find more people in your shoes.
Sure. So we're a big open source advocacy organization. We believe a lot in open source. My first business that I was involved in with my uncle was an internet service provider in Zimbabwe, and we couldn't afford Cisco routers and Windows licenses, anything like that. So we ran the whole thing on Linux. Our routers were Linux, our traffic shapers were Linux, and so we managed to successfully run. And my uncle went on to sell that successfully, that ISP successfully, and I got a handsome payout as a young man, and that was all built on open source. So it made me believe firmly in the power of open source early. Because of that, we've got a lot of Linux, and then I'm just not the biggest Windows fan personally. Again, it's never really gelled with me. I've never really liked the interface. I've found blue screens of death, etc., to be frustrating. I've found the speed of the operating system to often be challenging. So when Mac became Unix based, I had this Linux background. I used to use Linux on the desktop. I saw the first, I think they were called PowerBooks, not MacBooks, back in the day when OS X first got released. Uh, I really enjoyed that because you could open the terminal and get that Unix-like experience, but you also had the lovely window manager, UI, Office suite, and all of that sort of thing. So we, a lot of the team became Mac users early on, in my previous business, actually, before ITHQ. So when launching ITHQ, I was looking for a directory service. I wasn't going to do what everyone else did and use what's called Entra now as your Active Directory at the time. Not the hugest Google fan, so I thought, how do we get something that gives us directory capabilities that are portable, that allow us to choose upstream providers, work with things like OpenLDAP, etc. Works with Linux, Mac, and Windows, because we do still have Windows in the organization, regardless of how many times I ask those users to stop. So I was looking for that multi-platform directory service and found you guys. That was what I was looking for to solve our problem. Then that obviously translated into a solution. It wasn't even something we had considered would be a wicked tech problem, but as I discussed that with other people and showed them JumpCloud, and they were like, "Oh wow, it's got your SSH keys in, and you can control sudo access and admin access all from the same console, and um, push scripts out to Linux, Mac, and Windows." All the things they started to see, people loved. And as you guys have built out your product offering to include, single sign-on, that was there, but SAML and the SSO has expanded dramatically. Cloud Radius, password management, SaaS management. These are all things that tick a lot of boxes out there in the wild, and certainly do for us too. We have to log into a lot of firewalls, routers, switches, places where people have 802.1x and require radius authentication on VPNs or LDAP authentication on VPNs, that sort of thing. So again, we can just point that at JumpCloud and put the the people in our organization who need access to that organization in the right groups, and it all works like magic. So it's been seamless, and JumpCloud's a massive, massive part of our success, if I'm going to be honest.
Oh, that's great to hear. And the tick box thing that you mentioned, I think that's part of what we're trying to put together, which is gradually increasing the number of boxes that we can help you tick with, you say, relatively recent parts of the portfolio, such as the password manager and SaaS management. So that's really,
Absolutely.
really good to hear that you're doing that. And you mentioned there that obviously the JumpCloud directory is what kind of attracted you to that. But you mentioned that you're not a huge Windows fan, and you also mentioned in there that you're not necessarily a huge Google fan. So I'm just thinking about sort of productivity solutions do you use? Because that's they've pretty much got a duopoly, I guess, in some respects of whether it be Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. I guess
Absolutely.
what would you use internally, and what do your clients typically use in that space?
At the moment, everyone's pretty much M365, ourselves included, but we are actually testing some open alternatives to that currently. I'm not a fan with the way Microsoft determines pricing on that. I mean, if I don't know how much you know about it, but their profitability on that product range is off the charts. And they are actually, I believe, the most profitable business on the planet, and yet they're firing staff and putting prices up, etc. Saying, "Oh well, our costs have gone up," etc. When it's it is true their costs have gone up, but it's absolutely not true. Their margins have increased consistently before any price increase. So they are gouging. I don't believe that they're innovating nearly enough with that product suite. I mean, how different is Office today from the Office you used 20 years ago, right? But the price just keeps going up and keeps going up, and they're milking that cow. And good for them. I guess if I was in that situation, I may do the same thing. It's hard to tell what you would do if you were such a Nadella, but what I can say is I like to vote with my feet. So I don't I don't trust Google with my data, unfortunately. And I think their sort of approach to data has certainly lacked uh, full transparency, and I'm not sure that they're the good guys they claim they are. So we're looking at how you can actually move away, how you can maybe run something for yourself, go back to how it was, but without all the complexity. So there's a few platforms at the moment that are launching, that are open standards based on things like Postfix, Send Mail, Open Office, etc., and are building all of that functionality in. So we're exploring that at the moment, but we are actually an M365 house currently, and it worries me every day.
Yeah, I
Not
mean,
not just from a pricing perspective, also the fact that so many people have got all their eggs in the Microsoft basket.
yeah, I think that is a problem when it's so dominant, and also as you mentioned, the pricing and the licensing is it seems to be from the outside at least. Again, like you, I'm not privy to Microsoft's internal discussions around this, but it seems to be kind of almost engineered to be ridiculously complicated to understand and to know what you need for which licenses, especially when you're looking at server licenses and Azure licenses and Windows Server components, and it becomes on the face of it unnecessarily complex.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Completely unnecessary complexity, very much focused on extracting maximum value. Um, you know, gross margins have. I was just double checking because I had some stats on it. Gross margins for the business have increased more than 5% in the last 10 years. Operating margins have gone from 19% to 44%. So they've doubled in the last 10 years, their profitability. And yet, they just put their prices up at the end of last year for the Office suite, claiming that their input costs have gone up, but their profitability has doubled and their gross margin has gone up 5%. So it's all lies, smoke and mirrors, and I don't want to support that, really.
No, and also I'm curious. I might try and do a bit of research in this, but yeah, I guess like you, I'm kind of a little curious to what's different in Office 25, if that's what it's called now, to Office 2000, because I think you probably wouldn't notice a huge difference if you're using them in terms of like what's new in Excel. I can't remember the last major innovation in Excel.
Uh,
Probably pivot tables,
there's
probably 25 years ago, and that's probably
Yeah,
it.
exactly. I mean, they've changed the document format. There's more compatibility. You can PDF easier, etc. But it all feels like small incremental change, given that the cost has moved from a one-time license back in 2000 of something like 59 quid to now more than that per year as a subscription for the same tool. It's it doesn't feel right to me. So anyway,
No.
the point is we can sit and whine about it or we can find alternatives, and we're looking to do that. Coming back to the JumpCloud conversation though, what I love about JumpCloud is let's say Open LDAP, Open Radius, any one of these tools that I look at supports those authentication methods, supports SAML, SSO, so can either be an identity provider or integrate with an identity provider, can use Radius, LDAP, etc., which means JumpCloud's turning into a bit of a pivotal piece that allows me to choose providers, that allows me to test new technologies. That so long as they support one of those things, Radius, LDAP, SSO, SAML, I can integrate it with JumpCloud. So that's again, it's been pivotal. I genuinely love what you guys have done. I don't know who came up with the initial idea or how it was born, but I'm surprised that you're not one of the most used tools on the planet as a result of its Swiss Army knifedness, if that's a word.
Well, we've if it's not, we've used it in marketing before, so I guess it's we think it's a word. And I think it was probably our co-founders Raj and Greg who had the probably sitting down a little bit like your conversation, thinking at the time there was probably Active Directory, and it was very much an on-premise kind of product then, before it started being hosted externally, and then kind of moving to Entra ID. But I think that they probably thought, the directory, the concept of all of this information and the permissions and the devices and everything has got to be stored somewhere, and that Active Directory probably isn't the most open and best way to do it long term. I mean, I remember I'm old enough to remember when years and years ago, I think Novell had a kind of a really early stab of this with Novell Directory Services, I think it was called,
Hmm.
which at the time, and then this is before Windows had any kind of directory. It was kind of this was going to be the big thing, but then Microsoft came along and Active Directory killed off NDS, and then created this monopoly of directory services. And I'm guessing that Greg and Raj probably looked at that and thought, there's obviously room here for something else to do it differently, cloud first, and probably do it better than Microsoft can do it. So I think that's the origin of JumpCloud.
Yeah, and it was a godsend when I found it because there were other players, the Oktas, etc. of this world, but they didn't quite solve it the same way. Particularly the Linux integration, the sort of pushing out of keys and giving people access to that. We have a massive fleet of Linux devices, and that would be far more difficult to manage without JumpCloud there. So that ticking that box, not just the Windows and Mac box, and thinking about the desktop, but thinking about the desktop possibly being Linux or all the Linux servers out there. I imagine that they'd come from a similar background to myself and used Linux extensively up until that point, because for most people it's an afterthought, and it seems to
Yeah,
have been designed in.
absolutely. I'm sure they've got a lot in common with you. So yeah, I'm sure it'll be good to get you to have a chat with them at some point. But yeah, well, thanks for that. So moving on to the sort of benefits for your clients. We've spoken to you a little about the benefits for ITHQ of using JumpCloud, as you just mentioned there. But when you're speaking to your clients about JumpCloud and sort of deploying JumpCloud into those, what sort of pain points does it help solve for them?
We've migrated a few clients away from Active Directory who specifically felt all their eggs were in one basket, and that basket was worryingly full and also inflexible, not able to change shape easily. So that's been a major benefit. We're talking to a global law firm at the moment who are concerned about the same thing. So having some sort of backup of your identity outside of Microsoft's infrastructure, but then solving cloud radius, password management, etc. So that box ticking exercise, if you're just positioning JumpCloud as an identity provider, that could be quite tough if it's just a backup to AD or another way to authenticate and control permissions, devices, etc. That's quite a hard sell, but I think the whole wrap that you guys have built and the SaaS management, SSO management, how we use it to create a sort of single dashboard where people can find their apps, that sort of thing. Those pieces, when demoing that recently to this global, sorry, my machine, to this global law firm, uh, that ticked a lot of boxes for them, a lot of boxes that they weren't thinking to tick from the IAM provider, I suppose. You know, they were separately looking at a password manager for the entire workforce because currently people use independent password management and it's sort of fragmented. Uh, they had already had a request for solving cloud radius because they're trying to move to the cloud in general. They're moving a lot of things into Azure, and they want to get rid of the sort of data center cupboards that they have in all their offices around the world, but they do .1x and they require radius for their VPN auth, etc. So they're already looking at that. From that perspective, the list of services goes really nicely together. You guys have branched out in what I would say are fairly obvious ways. In the right way. You haven't tried to build things that feel like a lengthy leap away from the core product. Everything's quite tightly attached, I suppose, and as is a logical next step. So from that perspective, the pain points our clients call out normally fall into a few buckets with JumpCloud. It's not normally just IAM or Cloud Radius or Cloud LDAP or SSO or passwords or SaaS management. These are normally all or a decent subset of them are on the pain point list.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear because that's kind of by design that we're adding things on that we think are sort of adjacent products which are going to add value rather than just trying to create a completely separate product to bolt on the side, which is probably not as much use for you. And you mentioned SaaS management there, and just for those listening or watching, they probably don't know, but we recorded a webinar on that pretty recently for
We did, yeah.
your customers because and I find that really interesting, chatting about that, about the risks of, shadow IT, largely the risks of shadow IT, and our SaaS applications are a large part of that, along with sort of shadow hardware and things. But I think that SaaS management is going to be a big thing, or a bigger thing, for MSPs, because in the past MSPs have been very device and physical installed application centric rather than where we are now, which is the majority of significant amount of data is never stored on any servers within the organization. It's all held in SaaS apps somewhere where no one knows where it is. No one's looking over your shoulder to see which SaaS apps that users are accessing and where that data is going. So, I thought that was a really interesting webinar when we had chatted about SaaS. But when you're speaking to your clients and prospects, do they see SaaS as a threat?
They definitely do. As always, it varies. Some people see it as a threat. Some people just see it as an enabler, and they go, I trust my workforce if they go sign up for something. So long as we end up hearing about it at some point and it makes sense, then we're good. More and more, as we talk to people about the potential threats, as those platforms go bust, get purchased by other people, maybe change their approach, then all of a sudden the alarm bells start ringing. A lot of our clients really do understand the value of their data, as we've said, so they are deeply concerned about this, but it goes into the too hard bucket. So it is a real proper wicked tech problem. It's like that's just impossible to solve. We've got people who work from home, people who work from around the globe. Even if we invest in a DLP style solution or SASE style solution like Netscope, that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's a massive undertaking because we've got thousands of users around the world. Um, the JumpCloud model makes that much easier to approach initially, particularly for web apps, as you well know. It makes it much more palatable, and it is a relatively small add-on to the existing um, product set, if you like, depending on what they've got from JumpCloud. But um, yeah, the problem is real. People are recognizing it. They're looking to tackle it. They're not sure how. So we feel JumpCloud's a strong contender there, especially for people to get that early visibility and start to figure out how to create lists of sanctioned versus unsanctioned, and approach those users now having some visibility.
Yeah, and that part of the product is I would guess. I mean, the whole thing's developing really quickly, but I think that that part is going really quickly. So I think you'll start to see lots of new features and capabilities around that SaaS management coming pretty soon, which is hopefully beneficial to everyone. Right. Well, moving on to the final couple of questions, which are kind of tied together, really. So I'll ask them both at the same time, and then you can answer them as you see fit. I mean, one of which would be, if you were chatting with an MSP that was thinking about using JumpCloud, what would you say to them? And I guess the final question, again, which you can come to as and when you like, is your view on the MSP industry. I know that you're quite. I would like to think of you as a kind of forward-thinking MSP, probably not necessarily the typical MSP, in that I think sometimes your clients are probably a little bit different, a little bit more diverse. You mentioned things like Linux and areas like that, and multinational, which some MSPs may be shy from because they operate purely in a Microsoft world. So I guess if you were chatting to an MSP at a trade show and they said, Scott, I've been looking at JumpCloud. I saw you did a webinar with them. What can you tell me? Should we give it a look? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's that freedom, democratization, if you like. We're big Nutanix fans, and we're a partner of Nutanix because you can put their hypervisor stack, their NC2 Nutanix Cloud Clusters, it's called, into Azure, Google, or Microsoft, and then you can run across all three of those clouds, move stuff between them, and then you can pull that all back to your data center. So Nutanix, in that case, democratizes your choice of cloud providers, hardware, locations, etc. JumpCloud to me feels the same. It does a similar sort of thing by democratizing your choice of identity providers and the way you serve identities out to the necessary departments or businesses in your organization, depending on the size and scale. So, my view would be, you need to look at this. For us, we're always thinking about how to solve a problem. So, if a client comes to us and says, um, what tool should I buy today? What's the next tool I should look at? Would JumpCloud always come up in the conversation? No, not necessarily. They may have fairly robust identity and access management services. They might have more pressing needs, but for those people who are thinking about flexibility, about resilience, about being able to maintain choice of platforms too, because you can go, I can ditch my Mac tomorrow and get a Windows machine and use all the same authentication thanks to JumpCloud. I can ditch that and choose a Linux box. That's less easy to do. It's still possible with Entra and with Google, but it's a bigger ask, and there's more customization and work required. The fact that my staff move between desktops, and I've got a virtual Windows desktop and a virtual Linux desktop that I run in parallels on my Mac. All of them authenticate off JumpCloud. So yeah, I would say it's about flexibility. It's about that democratization. It's about freedom of platforms. It's about freedom of movement, really, in terms of your digital movement, if you like. So yeah, that would be it.
freedom is a word that we've used a lot as well. So it's nice to hear that that kind of ties in with some of the thinking internally. Right. Well, we're at time, Scott. Thanks so much for taking the time today. Really, really looking forward to seeing where you go next. I know you mentioned that you're continuing to expand and looking at international expansion as well, which is exciting. And
It is very exciting, very exciting.
yeah, so looking forward to seeing how that goes. As with your expansion in the UK, I wish you absolutely the continued best of luck. Thanks again for being a really great JumpCloud partner and advocate, as you spoke so eloquently about the solution. And hopefully we can sort of continue that partnership going forward. But thanks again for your time.
My pleasure, and thanks to JumpCloud for their continued innovation and for inviting me to have a chat.
Always welcome. We'll speak soon.
Cheers, Chris.